prairie wind carried dust and silence. Her body lay twisted beneath the dying branches of the split elm, her cheek pressed to the dirt. A silver pendant, cracked and blood-stained, clung to her throat. One boot was gone. Her revolver, empty, rested in her open palm like it had something to confess. They thought she was dead. Hell, they meant for her to be. The buzzards circled slow, waiting for the sun to finish what bullets had started. But behind them, from the scorched horizon, came a shadow on horseback, silent, watching. The kind of figure you don't pray for, because if he's coming, it's already too late. He didn't speak. He just dismounted, lifted her up like she was made of glass and memory, and vanished into the red dusk. Folks say she never should have lived, but he raised her like fire raises smoke. Subscribe now, because tomorrow's story will haunt you even deeper. You'll need it. But before that, let me take you to the day it all began. Dust. Hollow didn't get its name from the wind. It earned it from the way everything in it felt half buried. The town sat hunched between two red ridges, more like a scar than a settlement. Everything creaked. The saloon sign, the chapel door, even the bones of old men watching from porches with whiskey-stained teeth. People spoke in low tones here, or not at all. They looked at their boots when they passed one another, unless they were trying to provoke something, or someone. And they never looked her in the eye. She walked with a limp, left leg dragging slightly like it forgot how to be part of her. Her hat was pulled low, not to hide her face, but to dull the looks. She didn't flinch at them. She just didn't offer anything back. Her name was Delaney, no last name worth using anymore. Folks knew her as the outlaw's daughter, or the girl with the scar. The scar split her cheekbone like a crooked river, ran from just beneath her left eye down to the edge of her jaw. Some said it was from a knife. Others claimed it was a bullet graze during her father's last standoff. The truth? Only she knew. And she wasn't telling. She never spoke much, not since her father was strung up outside the sheriff's office, boots dangling 2 feet above regret. She'd been 12 then, too old to forget, too young to understand why her father never begged. He just looked at her before they dropped him, like he was sorry for what the world was going to do to her next. Now 20, Delaney kept to herself in a shack west of town, near the rusted train line no one used anymore. The chickens were half wild, and the roof leaked, but it was hers. She didn't work at the saloon, not pretty enough, they whispered. Didn't work the store, not trustworthy, they said. Didn't attend Sunday services, not forgiven, they muttered. So what did she do? She hunted, trapped, mended old guns for wandering drifters who didn't ask too many questions. The silence suited her, not that she had much choice. Delaney had gone deaf 3 winters ago after falling through thin ice on the river bend. She never told anyone, but folks figured it out when she stopped turning her head when called. They laughed at first, then they stopped bothering. A town like Dust Hollow doesn't have room for anyone broken, not unless it's the kind of broken they can drink, gamble, or shoot. She didn't fit, not anymore. But she stayed, because where else would she go? Some nights, she sat on the porch with her father's old revolver across her lap, polished it like a memory. It hadn't been fired in years. The weight of it was enough, like holding a piece of who she used to be before the whispers started. Once, a boy from the East Ranch tried to be kind, brought her a jar of peach preserves and said he liked her eyes. She didn't hear him, just stared. He never came back. Another time, a preacher tried to lay hands on her and pray the curse away. She broke his wrist with the butt of her gun. He didn't try again. The town let her be after that. She became a shadow, a ghost in boots, a name folks only mentioned when a horse went missing or something turned up dead. No proof, just easy suspicion. Sometimes she caught her reflection in the stream and didn't recognize herself. Other times she did, and wished she hadn't. There was no softness left in her, only grit, muscle, and something like sorrow with sharp edges. But once a week, she rode out to the tree line, the same place her father taught her how to shoot, and fired 6 clean rounds into the hanging bottle she'd strung up years ago. She never missed. It was the only time she smiled, and no one ever saw it. The only thing she kept besides the revolver was a music box. It didn't play anymore, but it had been her mother's. She never spoke about her mother. Some said she ran off before Delaney could walk. Others whispered she died the same night her father went outlaw. No one knew. Delaney didn't tell, and yet despite the silence, despite the distance she carved between herself and the rest of Dust Hollow, someone always watched. A stranger, a man with no name. Sometimes seen near the ridge, leaning against his horse, cigarette glowing in the dusk, never close, never far. She noticed him once, nodded slightly. He didn't move, didn't speak, and yet she felt like he knew things, maybe too much. That same night, a coyote's scream broke the silence near her shack, followed by 3 sharp gunshots that weren't hers. She didn't ask questions. Didn't need to. Dust Hollow had rules, and she was breaking them just by existing. If this is breaking your heart already, you haven't seen the worst yet. Tap subscribe. I've got another truth waiting for you tomorrow. The morning air felt heavier than usual, like the sky was leaning in, listening. Delaney saddled. Her horse, a dun mare with a lazy eye and a mean bite, and rode into town for supplies. She hadn't planned on lingering, but Dust Hollow had a way of stretching time when you least wanted it to. She kept her head down, hat low. The general store was half empty, Mrs. Alder behind the counter sorting beans into jars. The clink, clink, clink of dry beans was the only sound, except for the occasional floorboard groaning under Delaney's boots. As she collected a few things, flour, jerky, a spool of thread, the bell above the door chimed. Delaney didn't look up. She didn't need to. She felt him, the stranger. Same man she'd seen by the ridge, same rough shape of a man, broad-shouldered, coat dusty, hat pulled low. He walked with the quiet confidence of someone who could kill and not lose sleep over it. Not swaggering, just sure. He didn't browse, didn't touch anything. He just stood there, watching. Delaney kept her back to him, but her pulse kicked up all the same. Her fingers tightened around the thread spool until it cracked in her palm. She paid, nodded once to Mrs. Alder, and stepped out onto the street. The town was awake now. Blacksmith hammering, children running barefoot, the old sheriff snoozing, on the porch. And everywhere, eyes. Watching her, watching him. She cinched her supplies to the saddle, ready to be gone, when a shadow fell over her. She turned, slow, and there he was. Closer than she expected, close enough to see the faint scar slicing through his eyebrow, close enough to notice the sharp blue of his eyes. Not cold, but clear like a winter stream. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then, "You forgot this." His voice was rough velvet, low enough only she could hear. He held out. The spool of thread might the one she'd cracked. A small thing, a nothing thing. And yet the way he held it, not pitying, not mocking, made her chest ache in places she thought were dead. Delaney reached out, took it from his hand. Their fingers brushed, static. She nodded once. A thank you, she didn't voice. He tipped, his hat, turned, and was gone. Just like that. She stood there a long while, the spool burning in her palm like a brand. That afternoon, the whispers started. By dusk, the town buzzed with them. Seen talking to a drifter. Might be her kin. Trouble's coming. Delaney ignored it, or tried to. The truth was, Dust Hollow had no use for newcomers unless they came bearing gold, whiskey, or blood, and the stranger looked like he carried all 3 if he wanted to. Trouble followed men like him, and Dust Hollow didn't forgive. Girls like her for inviting it. The next morning she found a dead crow nailed to her door. No note. No signature. Didn't need one. Message was clear. Stay in your place, or worse. Delaney took it down without a word. Threw the bird into the fire. Watched the black feathers curl and pop in the flames. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in years. But that night, as the stars broke open the sky, she sat outside on the porch, music box in her lap, and thought about the stranger. The way he hadn't flinched at her scar. The way he didn't look through her, like she was something to be endured. He saw her, not what she carried, not what she'd lost. Her. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel completely hollow. Days passed. The stranger didn't show again. Not at the store, not by the ridge, not even in the corners of her dreams where lately he'd started to drift. Maybe he'd just been passing through. Maybe she imagined the whole thing. Dust Hollow has a way of making hope feel like a fever. Quick to burn, quicker to die. Then one evening, just as the sun poured gold across the land, she heard it in the slow creak of saddle leather. She turned, heart stuttering. And there he was, sitting on his horse at the fence line. Not moving, not speaking. Just there, an anchor against the pull of loneliness. She didn't wave, didn't smile, neither did he. But she stood, let him see her standing, not hiding, not small. And for a moment, the whole town, the whole bitter world, fell away, just the two of them, scar for scar, silence for silence. Whatever passed between them didn't need words. It was older than language, stronger than blood. She didn't know it yet, but the moment she stepped off that porch and walked toward him, slow, deliberate, the way you walk toward a wild animal you hope won't bolt, everything changed. The winds shifted, and Dust Hollow would never be the same. What if someone saw you for who you are, not what you carry? Subscribe. One day that story might be yours too. Dust Hollow had a way of waiting, like a rattlesnake in dry grass, still, patient, venom ready. For days, Delaney lived with the unease thick in the back of her throat, like she could taste the storm coming before it broke. The stranger didn't crowd her, didn't ask for more than she could give. He stayed at the edges of her world, always, near enough to see, never close enough to trap her. It was a kindness she didn't know how to accept. But the town noticed. Oh, they noticed. One night, it was the harvest dance. The only time the town pretended to be something better than it was. Lanterns hung from the old oak, fiddles sang from the saloon, and the air smelled like cider and dirt. Delaney wasn't going, hadn't even crossed her mind, but Mrs. Alder, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, insisted on pressing a dress into her hands at the store earlier that week. Not much good sitting alone, she muttered, almost grudging. Maybe it was kindness. Maybe it was guilt. Delaney didn't know. Against her better judgment, she washed up, pulled the dress over her scarred frame, and walked into the edges of the dance. Heads turned, not admiring, assessing. She ignored them, or tried to. A few songs in, a young man she recognized, Tom Bricker's boy, Samuel, stumbled toward her, whiskey blooming off him like a second skin. "Well, looky here," he slurred, loud enough to catch attention. "The outlaw's brat thinks she's people." The music faltered. Delaney kept her chin up, muscles wired tight. Samuel wasn't done. "Who you here for, sweetheart? That drifter? Bet he don't even know what kind of trash." He's sniffing round. Laughter, sharp, cruel, cracked through the night air. Someone shoved her from behind. Playful, in the way a rattler's first strike is playful. Delaney staggered, caught herself, didn't reach for her revolver, didn't run. Samuel leaned, close, his breath sour against her ear. "Maybe I ought to teach you some manners. Remind you what you are." The heat rose in her throat, shame, rage, the helplessness she thought she'd buried years ago. Before she could move, before she could think, a hand slammed Samuel backward. The stranger, not with a roar, not with fists, just one hard surgical shove that sent Samuel sprawling into the dust. He stood over him, still, silent, dangerous. The whole dance froze, breathless. Samuel's friends dragged him away, muttering oaths and promises Delaney knew would come due later. But the damage was done, not just the humiliation, the exposure. Now everyone knew. She wasn't just an outcast. She was someone's problem. That night she saddled her horse with shaking hands, threw what little she needed into a worn pack. She didn't cry. She didn't think. She just rode. Out past the old cattle trails, out past the broken fences and dry creek beds, into the open wild where the stars bled silver across the sky. The farther she got from Dust Hollow, the tighter her chest wound. Not freedom, panic. She didn't belong anywhere. Not here, not there, not even in the empty spaces between. Near midnight, the cold found her. A cutting, merciless thing that tore through her thin dress and rattled her bones. She tried to push on, tried to pretend she wasn't freezing, that the shivers racking her body were just nerves. But the world spun, the ground tilted, and she hit the frozen earth hard enough to knock the breath from her. Delaney curled into herself, trying to remember how to breathe. She didn't hear the hoofbeats, didn't see the figure dismount, didn't know he was there until she felt something heavy and warm settle over her. His coat. Strong hands, rough with calluses, lifted her gently, held her against a chest that smelled of leather, gunpowder, and something heartbreakingly clean. Soap, maybe. Hope, maybe. He didn't say anything, didn't scold or pity or lecture. He just picked her up, easy as a broken-winged bird, and carried her toward his horse. The world blurred in and out. Flashes of stars, the creak of saddle leather, the steady thump of a heart that wasn't hers. By the time she came fully awake, they were tucked under a rock overhang, a small fire licking at the cold. She was wrapped in blankets, his coat still draped around her shoulders. He sat a few feet away, sharpening a knife with slow, careful strokes. When he noticed her watching, he spoke, soft and certain. "They don't get to say who you are." 14 words. She counted them like prayers. She opened her mouth, to argue, to weep, to thank. But nothing came out. Didn't need to. He just nodded, like he understood every word she couldn't say. Later, when she was strong enough to sit up, he offered her a tin cup of coffee. Black and bitter. She drank it anyway, and when the fire burned low, when the stars leaned closer and the night wore thin, she told him, not everything, just enough. About the ice, about the silence, about waking up different and never being forgiven for surviving. He listened, not with sympathy, with respect, like her words were bullets, real, sharp, dangerous, and he honored the damage they could do. When she finished, he didn't tell her she was strong, didn't tell her she was brave. He just said, "I see you." And somehow that was enough, maybe more than enough. They rode back at dawn, not into Dust Hollow, not yet. Into the ridge country, where the rivers ran cleaner, the hills broke into wildflowers, and the future felt like something not yet claimed. She didn't ask him why he stayed. He didn't ask her why she ran. Some things didn't need to be spoken. Some things were written in the way he rode beside her, not leading, not following. And the way she matched his pace without thinking. For the first time in a long, broken stretch of years, Delaney didn't feel like a ghost in her own skin. She felt seen, and the weight of it was almost unbearable. They thought she was broken, but someone saw gold in the ashes. Subscribe, I promise you tomorrow's story will prove love still lives out here. The days after their return stretched out like rawhide, hard and unbreakable. Delaney. And the stranger, Jack, he told her finally, didn't speak of Dust Hollow, didn't speak much at all. They just worked. Out in the ridge country, they found an old line shack half fallen, leaning into the wind like an old drunk. Most would have called it a ruin. Delaney called it a beginning. They rebuilt it together. Slow, stubborn work. Jack pulled down the worst beams, taught her how to set a proper roofline. Delaney found wild planks along the riverbank, dragged them home, hands blistered and bleeding. At night they lit fires and ate whatever they could hunt. Rabbits, squirrels, a lean deer that took them both to bring down. They didn't speak of belonging. They just belonged. And somewhere in those long, grinding days, Delaney remembered how to laugh. Not loud, not often, but real. One night, under the silver howl of a full moon, Jack whittled a charm from elk bone, a little horse, rough and wild-looking, and handed it to her without a word. Delaney turned it over in her hands, heart thudding, She understood. This wasn't just survival. It was building. It was choosing. And she chose him. With her silences, with the way she stood shoulder to shoulder with him under the rising sun, with the way she didn't flinch anymore when he looked at her too. But fire always draws wolves. The first sign came quiet. A snapped fence. A broken gate. Someone had been watching. Someone who didn't want her to have this. The second sign was louder. A bullet through the window, close enough to shatter the new kettle she'd bought with the last of her coins. Dust Hollow wasn't finished with her. Neither, it seemed, was Jack's past. It was mid-afternoon when the law rode up. Sheriff Tillman. 3 deputies. Guns out, faces blank. Jack saw them first. Stepped in front of Delaney without thinking. Tillman's horse snorted, stamping at the dirt. "You're harboring a wanted man, girl," the sheriff called, voice carrying across the yard. Delaney felt the blood drain from her face. Jack's shoulders tightened. His hand hovered just near the grip of his pistol, not grabbing, not yet. "Name's Jack Mercer," Tillman went on, almost lazy. "Bounty on his head. Dead or alive." He smiled like it was a game. Delaney stepped forward before she even thought about it. "He ain't going anywhere," she said, voice low and steady. The deputies chuckled. Tillman just shook his head. "You always were a fool for lost causes, girl," he said. "Just like your daddy." The words hit her harder than the bullet would have. She almost stumbled. Almost. Jack's hand found her back, steady, solid, and she breathed. No more running, no more hiding. If this was how it ended, it would end standing, side by side. The first shot cracked the air wide open. Delaney didn't know who fired first. Jack, Tillman, one of the deputies, but suddenly the world was all smoke and shouting and the sharp, ringing bark of gunfire. She dove behind the water trough, heart hammering so loud she could barely hear herself think. Jack moved like a ghost, fast, deadly, precise. 2 deputies fell, not dead, but screaming, bleeding. Tillman cursed, riding hard for cover. Delaney's hands shook as she drew her, revolver old, rusted, heavy. She fired once, wide, again, closer. Then she saw him. Tillman, circling behind Jack, shotgun raised, and without thinking, without doubting, she stepped into the open and pulled the trigger. The shot took Tillman in the side, sent him sprawling. Silence fell, sudden and staggering. Dust hung in the air like fog. The third deputy dropped his gun and ran. Delaney lowered her weapon with shaking arms. Jack stared at her, not with surprise, with pride. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move. He crossed the yard in 3 long strides, took her face in his rough, scarred hands. "You're a hell of a shot," he murmured, and kissed her. Not soft, not sweet, like he meant to weld them together. They buried the bodies out past the fence line, said no prayers. They were beyond prayers now. Jack didn't ask her to leave. Delaney didn't ask him to stay. The bond between them was deeper than words, built in blood, fire, and the kind of loyalty you don't speak aloud for fear the gods might hear and take it away. Winter came early that year. Snow piled at the windows, pressed against the door. Inside, the fire crackled. The old shack, patched and warm now, felt like a heartbeat between them. They carved out a life, a stubborn, raw, beautiful life. Some days she rode the fence lines, rifle across her back, a queen in exile. Some nights Jack sang low songs she didn't recognize. Broken, half-remembered ballads from another lifetime. They didn't need more, until the letter came. It arrived by Ryder, a skinny kid with frostbitten fingers and scared eyes. Delaney took it with a frown, broke the seal. Jack watched her read it, jaw tightening. It wasn't good news. Never was. A bounty. Bigger than before. Wanted posters printed from here to the border. Jack's past had found them after all. They argued. Not screaming. Not cruel. Just wounded. Jack wanted her to go north. Start over. Forget him. Delaney refused. "You think I survived all this just to run?" she demanded, voice breaking. Jack turned away, fists clenching and unclenching. "It ain't about you," he said. "Finally, it's about what they'll do to you if you stay." Delaney crossed the room, took his hand. "Then let him come," she said. "I'm tired of running. I'm tired of hiding." She leaned her forehead against his chest, felt the hammering of his heart. "Stay with me," she whispered. "Stay and fight." Jack's arms closed around her, fierce, desperate. And in that silence, in that trembling firelight, they made a decision. Not to flee, not to bow, but to build. No matter what came. You've come this far with her. You felt that, didn't you? Subscribe. I want you to meet someone else tomorrow. Someone just as forgotten. The morning they rode back into Dust Hollow, the sky was the color of iron. Not a word between them. Not a promise, not a plan. Just the steady clop of hooves, on frozen dirt and the fire burning between them, hotter than any fear. Delaney kept her head high, her scars visible, her hands sure on the reins. Jack rode beside her, rifle slung low, coat open to show the battered star pinned to his shirt. The one he never spoke of, from a war nobody won. The town gathered slow, like buzzards. Whispers. Sidelong glances, the clatter of shutters being pulled closed. Sheriff Tillman was dead. Jack was an outlaw. Delaney was the girl they tried to bury under rumors and dust. And here they were, riding in like a storm that had learned how to walk. They stopped at the center of town. The old oak tree, the same one they left her under all those months ago, still stood, black and twisted. Delaney slid from the saddle. Her boots hit the ground with a final echoing thud. Jack dismounted beside her, his body a wall between her and every set of watching eyes. From the saloon, the mayor emerged, gray-faced, nervous, clutching a shotgun. Behind him the townsfolk, shopkeepers, widows, ranchers, gathered like sheep that had just realized the wolves wore familiar faces. "You don't belong here," the mayor barked, thin bravado, sweaty hands. Jack stepped forward, didn't reach for his gun, didn't raise his voice. He just said it plain. "She belongs more than any of you ever did." His voice cracked the cold morning wide open. Delaney stared at him, heart breaking and mending all at once. He wasn't offering her a hiding place. He was offering her the world. The mayor sputtered. "She's a curse. Always was." A few others muttered, but nobody moved. Delaney's fists clenched at her sides. She felt Jack's gaze on her. Steady, sure, waiting. But this wasn't his choice to make. It was hers. She stepped past him, slow, but unshaking. Faced the town that tried to kill her spirit, and for the first time she didn't feel small, didn't feel ruined. She felt whole. "If you think I'm cursed," she said, voice carrying like the first roll of thunder, "it's 'cause you made me that way." A murmur rippled through the crowd. She saw it, the flicker of shame, the flicker of fear. She didn't need them to like her, didn't even need them to understand. She just needed to choose. Delaney turned to Jack, saw the life they could have, hard, wild, real. She thought about staying, about proving something to people who never deserved her. But that wasn't freedom. Freedom was leaving. Freedom was building something that couldn't be broken by gossip or gunfire. Freedom was love. Without a word, she took Jack's hand, climbed back onto her horse, turned away from Dust Hollow. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. The town faded behind them, a bad memory dissolved in sunlight. Ahead, endless hills, endless sky. A life they would build from the ashes. Together, they found a clearing by the river before dusk. High grass, wildflowers clinging to frost, stars beginning to burn through the velvet blue of evening. Jack knelt, pulled a thin silver ring from his pocket. Nothing fancy, nothing loud, just real. Delaney knelt too. Met him there in the dirt and the wildflowers. No preacher, no witnesses. Just two broken souls choosing to be whole together. He slid the ring onto her finger, hand shaking just a little. She kissed him, soft this time, grateful. Later, curled by the fire, Delaney whispered the name she'd been carrying like a secret. Hope. Jack stirred, half asleep. "For what?" he mumbled. She smiled into the dark. For the girl we'll raise someday. A girl who would never know what it meant to be unwanted. A girl who would ride faster, laugh louder, love fiercer, because her mother once chose herself, because someone once saw her not as a curse, but as a miracle. She was never a curse. She was someone's miracle all along. Subscribe, and let me introduce you to the next miracle tomorrow.